Connolly and David Corbett to Book Passage.
Thanks. Nice.
Nice crowd.
Yeah.
You must know some people in this those of you who, I'm trying to think of how to start this. I was thinking about why I would introduce Mike, and now I'm sort of lost because that's already been done. So let's just get into it. I received a little package from your publicist, and one of the things she really wanted to emphasize was the documentary you've been part of now that involves Frank Morgan, who apparently has had a real influence on you from the start, and Harry. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, we just we filmed a documentary over the last couple of years about this musician who passed away, I think 7 years ago. And I knew a little bit and did a few things with where we talked about words and music and so forth. And the documentary will roll out next year. A lot of it was filmed at San Quentin, where Frank Morgan spent about 25 years. And it turned out very well. I mean, I was just kind of the guy who instigated it. I thought there'd be a good story there, and kind of turned it over to a very talented director and producer, and they came up with something that's really good. So if you get a chance next year, it'll probably be around on streaming and DVD, and hopefully we'll have some screenings, definitely up here because of the a lot of it was filmed up here with people that live up here that knew Frank and so forth. And like I said, San Quentin and Yoshi's over there in Oakland and so forth. But where it comes from, sorry.
That's
all right.
right.
I'll get back to you in 20 minutes. But
I don't think anyone will have a problem.
okay. Well, about 25 years ago when I started putting together this character of Harry Bosch, you think about all the different aspects of character that you want to have. It happened to be that my father was dying of cancer, and my father loved jazz. I did not. Because he loved jazz, I had to reject it as his son. And so it was a way of drawing back into my father's orbit at the end of his days. And so I wanted Harry to have music that was similar to my father's taste. And so I knew many of the jazz musicians that my father listened to, but I also wanted to branch out and kind of find my own. And one day, this would have been like in 1988, at the early stages, my first Harry Bosch book didn't come out till like 92, but I was just beginning to write it, the first one back then. My wife came in with this Time magazine and had a full-page story on Frank Morgan, and it was about his return to greatness after 28 years in prison. He had come out and recorded an album that was getting, critical raves, and so I went out and got that album and started playing it, and then I started infiltrating that into the Harry Bosch book, and then future Harry Bosch books, and it worked out pretty well. So I think he would be one of two of Harry's favorite musicians, and the other one was long dead by the time I was writing about this, and so Frank Morgan used to play in Los Angeles quite a bit, so I went to watch him a lot. And so this was all part of the putting together of Harry Bosch, and it was just all, it's hard to put your finger on it, but there is a connection between music and writing. And I got to know Frank a little bit. Like I said, we probably, we do so many gigs like this where you talk about writing and so forth, but I got to go to Berklee College of Music in Boston with him and spend a day where he did master classes, and then we would go on stage and talk about writing and music and this weird connection that I have a hard time describing. And it was probably one of the 5 best things I've gotten to do as a writer in terms of going out and talking about what I do. So it was very cool. He then passed away. And he liked doing that gig at Berklee College of Music so much he wanted to do a bunch of them, and we were setting up to do that when he got ill and he died. And so in a way the film does what that event did, or that day did, and it gets his message out. And it's, the film's called Sound of Redemption, and it is about a redemptive journey of this musician. And so there's a really great message in it, I think, and it came out pretty well.
It's on the festival circuit right now, right? Is that right?
Well, it debuted at the LA Film Festival and got some good reviews, and then we kind of stalled out because it debuted before we were completed, and we had completed rights and so forth, and so the music rights, because we have like the best music in there. We had this moment. What happened was we had a band of today's contemporary really good musicians go to San Quentin, where Frank Morgan was in a band for many years with Art Pepper and a lot of great artists. And we did a concert for the inmates in the same spot where Frank played, and that's kind of the heart of the film, and it's used sporadically through the film. But they played like a ton of music, and getting the rights, all that has slowed us down. We're just now getting all our rights issues finished, and so we're going to start the whole kind of rollout of the film in February. And so by mid next year, I'm sure it'll be out on DVD and it'll be out in streaming. And the Bay Area is such a big jazz area. I'm sure there'll be some screenings too.
I hope so, because I've just seen the trailer. You can see the trailer on YouTube, by the way, and it looks wonderful. I can't wait to see it. But there was one tune in particular off that album, the Moon Indigo album,
Right.
Lullaby,
Right.
which really seemed to, for you, speak to and about Harry, if I'm right.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's Harry's favorite song. It's my favorite song. It's only about 1 minute and 10 seconds, and it's primarily a alto saxophone solo, but it's a very kind of somber, sad, resolute type of song, and I just think it always has spoken to Harry, and it's helped me when I would write. I mean, we used to play that song at the beginning of my writing days. I don't do it as much anymore because a lot of times I'm kind of on the run when I'm writing, but it's a song I hear many times, and Frank didn't write it, he just performed it, but it was written by George Cables, who I've gotten to know and was part of this film, and it was a big part of the film, and so it was kind of a cool circle to bring that home.
Well, actually, the first time I listened to it was today, after I read the thing about the documentary, and I downloaded it, and I listened to it, and it made perfect sense to me, because I always think that despite how tough Harry always has been, there has been this core of decency and kindness about him that I think has made him as compelling as he is. And once I heard that tune, it just sort of like went off in my head. I went, oh, that's it.
Well, like I said, I mean, there's a certain sadness to that song, but underlying it is this like resolve to keep going, to keep grinding. I mean, that's what I get out of the song. I mean, who knows? Maybe if I talked to George Cables, he'd have a completely different story.
That's a real good reason why you shouldn't talk to musicians about their music.
Yeah. Oh, that thing. Yeah, I had a Tootsie Roll commercial, and I wrote that. But so it speaks to me in a certain way, and it speaks to me about the character of Harry Bosch, and so that's cool. Whatever works, as you know, whatever can get you in the mood to write, to drop you into a character's kind of feel, so that you can sit down at the keyboard and write about that character, then that's great if you can find that.
Well, Bosch has another incarnation now, a man named Titus Welliver, who is now acting as Harry in the Bosch TV series, which is on Amazon. Now, you've done the pilot, that's out. I've had a chance to see that. I'm sure many people here have as well. And then you've shot, I guess, 8 episodes now so far?
Yeah, the first season will be 10, and we're about to start the 9th of the 10.
Now, and you'll have the 10 in the can when it starts. So the people who want to binge watch, and I'm sure that doesn't describe anybody here, but those of us who do that sort of thing, we'll be able to watch all 10 back to back if we want.
Yeah, on February 13th, they'll be able to do that. So watch the show, but support your local bookstore.
There was a Newsday article, and I'm sure there's going to be you'll hear a lot of this, and I find it a little bit curious, but the reporter said, well, I'm not sure that Titus Welliver really suits my image of what Harry would be. My response to that was, well, how could you ever pick one actor who would respond to every single person's idea of what Bosch should be? But I have to admit, I've seen Titus Welliver in a number of different things, and when I saw him, I thought, this is a great choice. And in particular, you said that there's something about I forget exactly how you put it, but every time I've seen him, even in repose, there just seems to be a quivering intensity to it, and I thought, that's Bosch.
Yeah, he has this inner a tenseness and an idea that there's inner trouble, inner demons, and maybe that he's had a very difficult. The actor himself has had a very difficult life with a lot of tragedy and so forth, and I think that just comes out even in Repose. He has that sense of loss about him, but there's a resiliency, all those kind of things that are attributes I hope are in Harry Bosch. I saw in him. You're right. He's not going to be everybody's image of Harry Bosch, but he certainly works for me. And I had a hand in it. I was the one who threw his name into the hat when we were casting. I saw him in he's all over the place. He's been in lots of stuff. But I saw him in a TV show where he had like a 2-part guest starring role, and it just struck me that what I see in the eyes and behind the eyes is Harry Bosch. I mean, inner demons. I mean, it's a difficult thing to get that. I mean, you can't have an actor who says, "Man, I got inner demons." It's either there or it's not there. And with him, it's there.
Apparently there's been a little bit of rewriting about the journalist character, the female journalist. There was some question that maybe Harry was coming across a little bit too intense with her, and that's been softened a little bit. Did I read that right, or am I misinterpreting what I read?
You mean in the pilot? Well,
Yeah.
in the pilot we had a finite budget, and we did the best we could. Then we got the okay to go to a season, and we used some of that money to reshoot the pilot. Also, we had not locked up actors, so we had lost some actors and had to reshoot things anyway. So I mean, the way it was, there was a lot of feedback from people who had streamed that pilot, and I think it's valuable to get, and so we reacted to it.
Well, that was because it gets back to that lullaby thing. I was wondering if there wasn't something where that Harry's basic decency, a sort of kindness, may have been a pilot. It's so hard, especially when you've got a series with so many books. Trying to figure out what to put in a pilot to convey what you need to launch the series. How did you choose what was going to be in it, and which case, and what elements of his backstory and everything else? I mean,
well, you're right. It's very hard. I mean, you just really want to just give a flavor. I mean, we did get lullaby into the pilot, so there's Harry on his deck. There are aspects of the book series that are repeated, and one is that Harry goes back on his deck to try to make sense of things in his life and in his city and so forth. And we have that. To me, those are very important moments, even though they don't advance a plot or anything like that. And so we have him doing that, and Frank Morgan's lullaby is playing. So that's one of my favorite moments in the pilot. And what does that get us? Almost nothing. It's like a 1-minute interlude that, like I said, doesn't advance the plot at all. But I fought for it and got it in there, and happy with it.
I think those moments are crucial. I remember a screenwriter who once said that if you don't know what your character, if you're sort of stuck with your character, put them in a room by themselves and let them do what they do. And I think that's kind of the thing that Harry needs to do sometimes. I mean, if he's always acting, we don't get a sense of that inner life, and I think that scene really conveyed that really well. The rumor has it you have a new book, and this Bosch character apparently is part of it again. Although I was kind of stunned to realize that Harry's in his last year on the force.
Oh, no, say it ain't so.
You're hearing the rumbles. You deal with it.
Everybody read about it.
I mean, that's been coming for a while, and like at least 2 books ago, in the book, it said he signed a contract, a drop contract, a deferred retirement option plan. And in that book, it was called The Drop. In fact, it gave a date of when he was done, and that's very quickly approaching. And so I would say that The Burning Room is about this guy who's very relentless, who kind of moves like a bullet through life, kind of stepping back and realizing this is coming to an end soon, coming to grips with it, and also the heart of this book is about him, finding the person that he thinks he can pass on some of his wisdom and some of his ideas of what makes a good and fair cop. And so that was, and we can talk about the murder investigations and all that, but that to me is secondary to this character journey. That, as you say, it's coming to an end pretty quick. It doesn't mean it's the end of Harry Bosch. I mean, we'll see him in other ways. I mean, I already know what I'm writing next time, and he's in the book along with Mickey Haller. So it's not like any kind of end to Harry Bosch, but there is a transition coming. I'm not sure exactly when it's coming, and I think. I'm not going to give away anything about this book, but that question isn't really answered.
Well, I'm wondering, there was a great comment in an interview that you gave where you said that I wanted to bring in Lucia Soto, his protege in this, or Lucy Soto, because I like the idea of having somebody at the beginning of their learning curve again, and sort of like that he has to bring her along. That was a relationship that really wanted to be central to the book, and it works really, really well. But the minute I see her and begin to realize she's got baggage not unlike Harry. I mean, there's, and I'm just wondering, I don't know whether she's going to be a protagonist in new books, or if you thought about that, or...
Yeah, no, I like that character a lot. I don't know how we'll see her again, but I'm almost sure we'll see her again. What happens in this book, I mean, one thing you just mentioned, she's young, so I learned my lesson by having, I started the Harry Bosch series in 1992 when he was 42. I mean, I had no idea, I'd still be writing about him 20 something later.
Someone tells me you didn't know either.
But I learned, you can teach an old dog new tricks. So Lucy Soto was only 28, so I had 35 years with her.
Well, the idea for the murder at the center of it is a guy who was shot 10 years earlier, and then what they think was a drive-by, and he's ultimately passes away from complications. They're trying to figure out if it was attributable to the shooting, then they can consider it a homicide. And the first scene is they're trying to determine that. Where did that idea come from? Because I thought it was brilliant.
I wish I could say it, because I am brilliant. That's what But no, I cast the net, and I think if I have any skill or brilliant anywhere, it's in looking what comes up in the net. And so that's based on a real case. In this book, there's two cases that they're investigating. They're not related, but they're like I call it the double helix pattern, where two cases wind around each other but don't touch each other. And that one is also based on a real story. I put myself in position to be inspired. I spend a lot of time with the kind of people I write about, whether it's defense attorneys or homicide detectives, and everybody's a good story. And your ear picks up when a story becomes personal and someone's telling you. They're not going like, oh yeah, this happened to these guys. When they start talking about something that means something to them, there's a change in their voice, and I have a good ear for that. That's the throwing out of the net. And so I happen, in both these cases, the real inspirational cases were worked by people who told me about them, and so that's why they stuck and became parts of this book.
You mentioned defense attorneys. I used to work a lot of criminal defense in LA, and I know some of the attorneys down there. And I always wondered, was there anybody in particular that sort of inspired Mickey Haller?
Yeah. Maybe you know his name is David Ogden. He's retired.
No, I thought you were going to say David Kennedy. I was like, yes, I don't know. But
he's retired now, but I just met him by happenstance. I was at a Dodger baseball game, and he was the guy sitting next to me, and he was wearing a shirt and a tie, and it was a day game, so I knew he was playing hooky. So we started talking, and he revealed he was a defense attorney, and then I said, "Where's your office?" And he said it was my car, and then kind of went from there. And I know it's different with the Giants, but the Dodgers, you never stay past the sixth inning because of traffic. But this guy was so fascinating, and I could tell this might be a book, so I ended up staying to the ninth inning, asking him question after question, and then from that came Mickey Haller.
Okay, I was just wondering, because I met Marcia Clark, she's writing mysteries now. And I didn't know it, but she'd been a defense attorney before she became a prosecutor. Just realized that just wasn't her bent. She couldn't be on that side. But she worked with a guy that I had worked with named Don Ray, and she just speaks of him glowingly. I said, yeah, Don Ray's what lawyers should be. I mean, he was in the O.J. Simpson trial, but nobody knows his name. Why? Because he wasn't out to be a headline whore. He was out to take care of his client. He was A.C. Cowling's lawyer. And AC Cowlings never played a part in that farce, because Don knows how to do his job. I just wanted, if maybe, but no. Okay, so, anyway, I thought that that's pretty much all I have to ask, but I'm sure that some of you have some questions. I thought so. I'll start with the lady and get back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Why did you give Harry Bosch the name of a famous person? And if you're from up here, why is he down there in LA?
What makes you think I'm from up here?
No, I thought I read something that you were from like Sacramento or someplace up here.
No, I'm actually from Philadelphia. So.
My wife's impressed with that because she's from Philadelphia. This is a Philly guy.
Well, the name, you just try to convey character wherever you can in this story. And, oh yes, where did I come up with it, or why did I give Harry Bosch the name of a famous painter? And us writers know that it's all about character. So whenever you can say something about character, do it. And the name is a perfect opportunity. And so I had, just by happenstance, studied the paintings of Hieronymus Bosch at length when I was in college, and not because of me, because of a humanities teacher who was fixated on him. And so we studied him, and I enjoyed the class, so I signed up for another class with him. And so I spent a long time gazing at these weird paintings. And so then, it must have been like 12 or 15 years later, I'm putting together this character, and the paintings are about a world going wrong, about chaos, the wages of sin. Almost every description you could give to a painting, you can give to a crime scene, a homicide scene. And so that kind of metaphoric connection just struck me, and I wanted, and so it just happened. I kind of knew that maybe half the people would know this was a real famous painter, and half the people wouldn't, and maybe think, where did you get a name like that? So to me, it was one of those things that was going to work either way. And it did work until I got to Holland. And the real painter was Flemish, Holland, Dutch. And when I got there on a book tour, every journalist who interviewed me, the first question was, why did you call him Harry? Because Hieronymus is the Latin root of Jerome, so I guess I should call him Jerry. But no one in the United States ever brought that up. Everybody in Holland doesn't get it.
How about LA? Why is he in LA?
Oh, because I was living in LA, and I was a newspaper reporter for a long time in Los Angeles, on the crime beat and the court beat. And, I wanted to take, my first 3 books I wrote while I was still a reporter at the LA Times, and so I was taking what I was, what I had exposure to, which was the real detectives and real courtrooms and things like that. Yeah.
Did you create Harry with the idea that this was going to be a continuing series, or was this a one-off character and then you suddenly kind of took hold?
You want to know if I created Harry with the idea of a series, or was it a one-off and outside forces took over? No, I loved series fiction. That reading it, I loved it, and that was very influential on me. So, but when you've never published a book, you have you're just hoping to get invited to the party, kind of, so to speak. So. I threw everything I could think of about Harry into the first book, and really kind of felt like there was only one aspect of his character that was not explored in that first book, and that was who killed his mother, 28 or 30 years before. And so that was my little hidden thing, that if they did say, hey, how about another book, I had, okay, he can do this. And so that did happen, and I said, yeah, I have an idea of this, and then my editor said no. Save that one for down the line a little bit and come up with something else. So that was encouraging, because they were thinking there is a down the line, so all that sounded good. No, yeah, sorry.
I'm just going to comment, your voice is the only voice I've heard that's lower than Titus Welliver's. You've got a very deep bass, so I was wondering if that's how you hear Harry as well, like yourself.
She asked about Harry's voice and whether I hear my own. Maybe I do. I've never really thought about that, but I consciously don't listen to any of my audio books. I don't want to hear someone else's voice. Now that sounds kind of dumb since there's now a TV show and there's actually a guy physically representing him. Why can't I listen to a voice? But I did make arrangements for Titus to read this book, so now he's doing the voices on the Audible. So, and I think his voice is great. You hear your own voice. Everyone hears your own voice differently than what it really is. So I don't know. I don't think I sound like Harry Bosch, but I think Titus really does.
Back in the back.
Yeah, speaking of voices, in one of your books, you actually published a phone number, and if you called that phone number, Harry Bosch actually answered it. My two questions are, is that number still active and who listens to those voice messages?
Yeah, I got it right on my phone right here.
Return my call.
Yeah, it's still still active. It's that old 555 thing. Everyone knows that's a phony phone number. So I just didn't want to do it. So I bought a phone, a service, and I've had that for a number of years. Now they're using it on the show. There's a point where Harry's interviewing this creepy guy in prison and grabs his arm and writes his phone number on the guy's arm and says, if you have something legitimate to tell me, call me. And you see that number. So when that comes out, the phone will really start costing me a lot of money.
Yes, ma'am.
So you have two protagonists, Mickey Holler and Harry Bosch. How did you come up with each of them, and how do you keep them straight?
It's not hard to. She asked how I keep all these characters straight and where they came from. We talked about Mickey Holler. There was serendipity. I met a guy who inspired that right on the spot. Harry Bosch just came from me being a reporter and talking to dozens of detectives a day. And so I drew from them, and of course I drew from literature, film, all kinds of inspiration. It's all hodgepodge. And for some reason I don't have a problem keeping them separate. I think they're those two especially are pretty distinctively different in terms of where they are in the world. I mean, to me the big thing is Harry Bosch. On page 1, I have the reader in my pocket because Harry Bosch is in a noble pursuit. He's trying to find a killer. And who's not down for that? So on page 1, they're ready to ride with Harry Bosch. Mickey Holler is more of a slippery character, and he's often working against what people perceive as ideas of justice. And so he takes a lot of work. I gotta find ways of making him a sympathetic character to the readers. And on My Own Worst Enemy, I usually start every book with him doing something pretty underhanded, and then we go, okay, now let's figure out how we can make this guy likable. And so in my mind, they're quite different in that regard. One's kind of like a hero, one's anti-hero. And so
You had a comment responding with it that Harry took some time off for a while and became a private investigator. He said, and then I realized in all my years of doing reporting on police work, I'd never once heard of a PI who solved a case. And so I knew that this was
A murder case.
A murder case, okay. Yeah. As a former PI, I took umbrage at this. Until I was willing to accept the fact that it was true. And I actually said, no, we don't solve cases, we create fog. And, but Mickey Holler's kind of in the same boat. I mean, that's sort of the same realm. So why does it work for Mickey, do you think, and it didn't work for Harry as a PI?
You know what? I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with me maturing as a writer. But I think what makes Harry Bosch interesting is the way he faces the challenges of bureaucracy and politics. And I think that is set up best when he's in a bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy of the LAPD. So for the couple books where I had him outside of that, it was just hard for me to build those kind of obstacles. And so that's why, just by luck, I keep talking about all the serendipity in my career, but a new police chief came in and started hiring back a lot of detectives who had left because they were fed up with all the controversies and bad things going on in the LAPD. That chief opened up a program to bring detectives back, so I was able to bring Harry back legitimately, and kind of went from there. Now I'm going to face that same issue again when Harry quits, like what do I do with Harry? Is it just go straight into PI work, or is there something else I can do with him? And you know, and that's my main worry. Where are these kind of obstacles going to come from that allow me to show that character and connect that character to readers?
Yes.
When you created the Mickey Haller character, did you always have it in your mind that there was going to be that relationship with Harry Bosch?
He asked if I knew when I created the Lincoln Lawyer that there would be that connection with Harry Bosch. And I did about 2 drafts into the first book. I realized, I started the Lincoln Lawyer, you know, inspired by this guy at the baseball game. I just thought it'd be a one-off thing because it's so different from what I've written about. I've written about other characters in Harry Bosch, but almost all of them, other than the character of Boyd Moon, are people in society expected to look into things, you know, like a reporter, FBI profilers, things like that. And I've always been on that kind of side of the aisle. And I thought this would be like Boyd Moon. Boyd Moon's about a criminal. I thought this would be a one-time deal, but about 2 drafts in, I realized how much I was intrigued by this character for the reasons I just explained. Almost from a writing standpoint, the challenge of it. I really like that. So then I changed the name. I went back into the Bosch books, and in the second book, he has a memory of when he found out who his father was, and he visited his father one time before his father died, and the father's name was Haller, Michael Haller. And when in that memory, there's a little kid in the house. And so I just thought that little kid could grow up to be the Lincoln Lawyer, so I changed his name to Michael Haller Jr. And so there was the seed. I wasn't sure, you know, I didn't know how this book would be received or anything, but I thought if it got received well and I still felt the need to explore that character, that would be something I could pull out, the rabbit out of the hat, you know, at the right moment.
Over here.
You are incredibly prolific and also a really good writer. So what is your writing schedule like? And do you take time off between books? And do you have multiple books going at once?
She asked about the process. She claims I'm prolific. I don't really think I'm prolific enough, but I don't take time. Where I take time is between drafts, you know, so I can try to you know, clear my mind and come back to it. When I start writing a draft, I'll write every day, and it doesn't mean like 8-hour days. Some days I only write for an hour. But I think it's important to write every day so you keep the momentum and the story swirling around in your head. So I'll start a draft, write every day, and then when that's done, maybe I'll go on a vacation or something. I like to try to take a couple weeks off and then come back to it without having thought about it for a couple weeks and do it again, go through it again. And and then when I have a second draft, that's usually when I give it to people who are advisors to me. Whether if it's a Lincoln Lawyer book, then I have a cadre of 3 defense attorneys who I give it to and say, what I got wrong. A lot of times I'll say, you've been in these kind of situations, tell me the inside track, or what would you do, or what would you say. I'm always looking for the way people speak and the shortcuts they take. And so usually I gather all that and do a third and final draft, and that's really where these books come together. I think it's quite a chore for me to give my second draft to like a cop or a lawyer and say, make it better. Tell me how to make it better, because it definitely needs to be made better at that point.
That's a real, when I was in math, I studied math in college, and mainly because the professors inspired me more than any other professors in any department. And one of the things that the head of the department always said, it was a quote from William James, which is, you learn to swim in the winter, and you learn to ski in the summer. And what they were saying is, the way you solve problems is you work very, very, very hard at them, even though you're not solving them. And then when you step away from them, your unconscious continues trying to solve the problem. And I think that 3-week vacation taking away is a way just to let your unconscious begin solving what your conscious has tried to solve, maybe incorrectly or inadequately. That's a really interesting process. I didn't realize you did that. In the back?
So Michael, I can think of at least 4 books that involve the death of a lawyer, and then Mickey Haller's had his own hospitalizations over his 5 books. should me as a lawyer invest in the bar?
People started laughing when you asked your question, so what was the question, Mark?
Should the bar be concerned about how you're treating lawyers and your books?
Well, I know it's also killed at least 2 journalists, and I was a journalist as well. And also made one a serial killer, so come on. It's all even. No, I mean, you're getting at one of the things we have to do in these novels that make them veer some from real life, and that is we have high stakes, we have that danger, and so forth. I try to make these books as real as possible. I mean, this is the 19th Harry Bosch book, and there's only been a few times I think that he's really been in danger. So I'm kind of proud that not every book he's in a shootout and all that kind of stuff, but he is in a few of them. But it's the constant battle of slave to accuracy and the verisimilitude of this world, or a slave to drama, and the needle's somewhere in the middle. And in some books it swings more to the right, and some it swings more to the left.
Question here in the corner.
Speaking of going from journalism to fiction, how was that transition for you? Being a reporter, a crime reporter for many years, and then making the transition to writing fiction. Talk about that a little bit.
She asked about the transition from journalism to fiction. Well, I always remember that when I was a reporter, there was a lot of brass in LAPD who said I was writing fiction back then. Because they didn't like it that much. What made it easy for me was that I went into journalism to hopefully get to where I could write crime novels. It wasn't like I was struck by the lightning bolt that said I want to be a writer. When I was struck by the lightning bolt, it was I want to be a writer of crime novels. From the very beginning, that's what I wanted to do. And in Conspiracy with my parents, mostly my father's suggestion was go into journalism and get into courtrooms, get into police stations, get up close to the world you want to write about. And on top of that, you'll be writing every day, so you'll learn the craft of writing and build a work ethic about it. And my father kind of presented this to me, and so I followed it, and it's just amazing how it worked out, And that's one of the things that's disappointing, that what I said before about my father passing away before my first book was published. He did know that I got a deal, that it was going to be published, but he didn't see his idea come to fruition.
Do one last question. Lady back here? Yes.
When you're writing and you are starting, well, maybe you don't even know you're starting a book, what happens in your process? Do you know that you're leading in some direction? And what happens if something comes up that's kind of out of the ordinary? Do you keep a notebook with like little ideas in?
I don't commit anything to paper. It's weird. I don't know why, or it's probably this egotistical thing about like if it's good I won't forget it, but I've forgotten all kinds of really good stuff. But I don't know why it's just the way I've written it, and maybe it goes back to the music and how a lot of jazz is improvisational. And I do have this idea when I sit down at my laptop, it's like Keith Jarrett sitting at the keyboard, and you see what happens. And so I don't outline. The only thing I put on paper is the actual story. And when I hang out with cops and pick up stories and so forth, I don't write any of them down. And that's just the way I've been. So it's just kind of weird, but that's the way it works for me. This is what the one thing is, I don't like sit down and say, okay, it's time to write a book and things just happen. I think about stuff, I carry stuff in my mental pockets sometimes for years. But before I start writing a book, I know two things. I know exactly how it's going to start, and I know exactly how it's going to end. And sometimes the ending has not been what I predicted, 9 months earlier. But not too often. Maybe, out of 27 books, maybe 3 times I've come to a different ending. And a couple times I've come to the ending I thought it wasn't good enough, so I added another ending. People complain that sometimes my books have 3 or 4 endings. And I gotta end this, but it's rare that it involves any kind. I have a really clean desk. I don't have any paperwork. I do remember, like for example, when I got that idea for the Lincoln Lawyer, so I met this guy at a Dodger game, but I didn't know him before. But I had some criminal defense attorneys that I was very close to. In fact, my college roommate is a criminal defense attorney, and so I'd known him for years. And I wanted to be a fly on the wall in his office, so I took this idea from the Dodgers guy and then researched it with other lawyers. And I still didn't write anything down, but one time I was having drinks with him and a bunch of lawyers in a bar, and they were talking about how difficult it is to have a client that you really know in your heart is innocent, because the stakes are so high. If you mess this up, you carry that guilt forever. And he said there's no client as scary as an innocent man. So I did take my cocktail, I took my martini off my napkin and wrote that line down. And that became the first line of The Lincoln Lawyer. And that's the last time I remember writing anything down in terms of research.
I think that's a great note to end. It's getting time that I think Mike should sign some books. So hopefully you want to announce where people can buy them and how you want to run this.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.